Well, hello there, spectacular private practice owner. My name is Gerda, and you are listening to the Private Practice Success Podcast. And this is episode number 45. The topic for today's episode is the NDIS debacle. Now, you might be thinking, debacle? That is a really strong word to use, Gerda. And I know it is. And I actually really thought to myself, is that the right word? And I think it is. And I also suspect that if you are an allied health practice owner currently being impacted by the changes within the NDIS, then you will be the first to wholeheartedly agree that it is 100% a debacle. You might even use some stronger and even some, what's referred to as choice words when referring to the NDIS. But we're going to talk about it today. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that I do not consider myself to be an expert in all things NDIS. I'm pretty sure that there's lots of people out there that know way more about the NDIS than I do. But what I do know about is based upon my own practice providing NDIS services, albeit being as a non-registered, also referred to as an unregistered provider. So we do a lot of NDIS work within my practice. I also mentor, coach, and support allied health group practice owners that does a lot of NDIS work, both as unregistered providers, but also as registered providers. So I am most certainly 100% across the frustrations and the disappointment and the panic and all of the emotions that accompanies the proposed and changes that has already happened within the NDIS, particularly during the course of the last 12 months. So I do get it. I most certainly get it. But again, I don't call myself an NDIS expert. I am an allied health private practice expert. I'm also not an expert in the field of disability, right? Yes, we work with a lot of clients that has a disability within my practice who are part of the NDIS, but me, myself, I'm a trauma psychologist. Though, again, we've got clients within my practice and there's clients of my business consulting clients that work within that space. But again, I'm not an expert in it. But I'm going to share with you my take, my thoughts, and my opinion on the NDIS debacle as somebody that has a group private practice, that has skin in the game, that has had to deal with the NDIS for many, many years now, and who every day, week, month are supporting group practice owners working in that space. Now, if you are one of my listeners that are within allied health private practice and you don't do any NDIS work, and I'm sure there are probably many of you, I'm going to give you a very, very short, sharp, quick synopsis of the main pain points of late. I would say the biggest pain points during the course of 2025 was the pricing review that was released somewhere mid-year, like June. I think it was like before the start of the financial year. And as part of those changes, there was a number of things that happened. So in a nutshell, the pricing guidelines that was released and that took effect in July 2025 had the following biggest impacts. The majority of disciplines had no increase to the dollar amount that they could charge per billable client hour, which is fairly ridiculous, right? Because costs of business goes up every year. If you think the super that has gone up, overheads, wage costs, the Allied Health and Support Services Award, there has been award increases significant this year, particularly not just the normal CPI. Like the cost of doing business goes up every year. But the NDIS have gone, no, even though your cost goes up as a business, we don't care. We are still just paying X amount of dollars. And that was across majority of the disciplines. And then, and when I speak disciplines, I mean allied health, then there were certain disciplines in certain states that had their rates go down. And then there were certain disciplines that had their rates go up. So it was really a bit of a mixed bag. However, one of the major changes was the change in what providers can charge for travel. So that was basically slashed in half. And as a result, that will obviously have a huge impact for the many providers that provide mobile services, which will obviously therefore have a big impact in access to services, because I'm going to assume that a lot of people are just not going to be able to provide those services, right? There's only so much margin in the work that we do within allied health. And when the rates doesn't increase, the margins just get smaller and smaller and smaller until there's nothing left. And when there's nothing left, a business needs to close their doors. Now, these pricing guidelines obviously has the biggest impact on you if you are an NDIS registered service provider, which basically means that what you charge a self-funded client, or what you charge a plan managed or NDIA managed client is now set by the NDIS or the government, right? So they're telling you, you can only charge X amount of dollars, and you can stand on your head, you can do whatever you want, you can't charge any more. Now, if you are not a registered provider, you do not have to stick to that pricing amount, okay? You can actually charge more. You can charge your private rates. But I'm not going to go into the detail about that, how you make that work and that stuff today, because that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is what you need to do when stuff like this is impacting your business. It's also important to mention the Thriving Kids announcement. Now, this announcement was made very recently, actually, on the 20th of August, 2025, where the minister announced that as of July 2026, kids that are 8 years and under and who has a diagnosis of mild to moderate, and I'm using the minister and the government's words here, that has mild to moderate developmental delay or autism, those kiddies will no longer be looked after within the NDIS. And instead, they will become part of what will be called the Thriving Kids program. Now, this program will be run off the back of existing services, such as within schools, community hubs, GPs, all of those type of services that is already within the community. Now, you can imagine, and I want you to imagine, if you are a pediatric group practice owner, and the emphasis here is on pediatric, where you actually support kids within that age range, and majority of your work is in the NDIS, just imagine hearing that on that day. Just imagine. That is a big blow, potentially, because we actually don't know how Thriving Kids are going to work. We actually don't know how kids are going to get there. We don't know what the funding is going to look like. Is it going to be like Medicare, potentially, where there's a contribution from the government, but there's a big gap fee? We don't know. Okay. And when we don't know and there is uncertainty, that causes a lot of angst, because how do you problem solve this when you don't know what's going to happen? And the thing is, you cannot wait until next year until the government decides to tell us how this is going to work. You need to do something now already. So this is a really important time for practice owners when it comes to making decisions around where to go to from here. And I'm in a lot of Facebook groups, and I read a lot of posts, I read a lot of comments, and it's saddening that people are experiencing this level of disillusionment with the system, particularly the NDIS, and particularly within the disability sector. There's a lot of disillusionment. People that work in the NDIS and that work in disability, they are fighters, right? They are advocates. They will do anything they can for their clients, for their community. But when you have to fight day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and it feels like you're fighting this huge giant that is the government, there's a point where you just burn out, where you just can't anymore. And I'm not saying give up. That's not who I am. I am not somebody that gives up. The worst thing you can tell me to do is to give up, to just close the practice doors. That's the last thing I would ever do. And I know people are doing that. I mean, big organizations are closing their doors. I'm not talking about a little group of private practice down the road. I'm talking like huge organizations, NGOs as well, that gets funding. They are closing their doors to NDIS and specific client work because there's no margin. It's like even NGOs, did you know, even an NGO needs to run a business that at the very least breaks even. They cannot run a business at a loss, okay? That's not how an NGO is run. An NGO has a board that ensures that it runs at a profit, because otherwise they really need to fire the entire freaking board because they shouldn't be making a loss. And they just going, well, the numbers are saying that we can't do this, so we're getting the hell out of here. So what is left for you as a small to medium-sized group hire practice to do if the big guns can't do it? And the difficulty is my biggest fear really is for solo practitioners, because what do? They just eat it. They just absorb. And what happens? They're the ones that are going to burn out the fastest, because that's just what they do, because they've got good hearts, right? But you can't run a business on a good heart. Doesn't matter how passionate you are about something. Doesn't matter how big of an advocate you are. It's like you can't do business out of nothing. Money is a resource. It has to pay for your room, for the fuel in your car if you're doing home visits, okay, for the wear and tear on your car, for your professional indemnity insurance so that you can actually work, for your professional registration so you can actually work. That shit ain't free, okay? And as a group practice owner, we need to pay our team well. We've got a responsibility to look after them. We need to pay our bills. We need to keep the doors open, okay? And unfortunately, the NDIS, they're making it almost impossible to do. And I want to be really clear. I wouldn't recommend closing your doors, because I do not want the industry to lose any more providers, okay? Please remember that that is just one option. But I also understand that when you are freaking tired, overwhelmed, exhausted, and over fighting the system, then sometimes that is or seems like the best, the only, or maybe the easiest way out of it, because all you want is relief. You want relief from all the worry, the panic, the concern, the not knowing, the frustration, the anger, and all of the other emotions that come with it. So I totally get it. But I want you to know that there is other options. And the option is simple. You need to diversify the revenue streams coming into your business. Now, I know when I say that, because you've got all those emotions that I've just mentioned, you're probably just shutting down when you hear that. You're probably thinking, that's all too hard, or I can't do that, or I don't have the spoons to try that. I don't even know where to start. But the thing is this, you have to start. Because when you have all your eggs in one basket, it becomes really hard to run a future-proofed business. And this is your job. It's your job to future-proof your business. Now, you might be thinking, well, Gerda, it's easy for you to say. You're not an NDIS registered provider. You don't have this problem. And no, I don't. Although we do NDIS work, NDIS is probably 15% of the revenue coming into my group private practice. But I've been in a very similar situation to where you are, and I'll tell you about this. So this is probably, what year is it now? It's 2025, probably 10 years ago. I'm so bad with timelines, right? It's why I never took history at school, because I couldn't remember all those freaking dates that you need to remember if you take history as a subject. Of course, I took it back in South Africa, but it was all the dates. You had to know all these dates. And I'm just shit at dates. So I don't want to lie to you, but it feels like many years ago. And at that time at my group practice, we did a lot of funded work under what was then called the Better Outcomes Program. So if you've been in private practice for as long as I've been, you would probably know about the Better Outcomes in Mental Health Program. So the Medicare funding is called the Better Access under mental health. This was the Better Outcomes under mental health. And that funding is still there today. It's just called something different. And it was administered by what is today called primary healthcare networks. Back then, they were called something else. Don't ask me what it was. I can't remember. They've actually been through quite a number of name changes, at least 2 or 3 over the years. They are now called primary healthcare networks. I know in my neck of the woods down in Brisbane, the funding is now not referred to as better outcomes. It's referred to as psychological therapies. Here where we are now in Agnes Water, the funding is called Healthy Minds, for example. And every primary healthcare network calls it something different. But anyway, so back then, that was 50% of the revenue that came into my group private practice was this Better Outcomes funding. Okay, because one of my practices have always traditionally been in a lower socioeconomic area. So we had a lot of people that met criteria for that funding. So because it was basically earmarked for people with significant financial difficulties to allow them to access free sessions, right? And we were called into a meeting at their offices, not just us, all the providers at that time. So I attended the meeting and I went with my then principal psychologist. And at this meeting, where we were and everybody else working underneath that program as providers, was when they announced that the way that they assign the funding would be changing. So at that time, what would happen if you wanted to receive better outcomes referrals, all you would do is just register with them, tell them where you're located, and if there were clients in that location, they would send them to you. And then they said going forward, this would be a tender process. The tender will be won by probably a large NGO, and it will be up to that organization to then get their own contractors or their own employees, and they would now be in charge of allocating who gets the funding and AKA the clients. And I remember Frankie and me walking out, and we were just, standing in the parking lot, like just leaning upon the car, looking at one another. And I just went, holy shit, Frankie, we're fucked. Because that was half our business. Half our business. And I clearly remember what that moment felt like. That wave of just honey, of what does this mean and what do I need to do to fix this? But it was also a moment where I made a decision that I'm never going to be here ever freaking again. This is the first and this is the freaking last time that I am in one of these holy shit, we fucked moments. And I never went there again. And that was only 50% of my revenue. So I can only imagine what it must feel like for group practice owners who has 80, 90, 100% of their revenue coming from the NDIS right now. And all they are seeing is their margins thinning and thinning and thinning. And if you are in the paediatric space and this thriving kids thing has been announced, again, I can't imagine how it must feel when you know that 80% of your revenue could potentially just vanish come the 1st of July 2026. But the message I have for you today is I'm still here. My business is still here. We survived it, and so can you. And it starts by taking the first steps towards diversifying your revenue streams within your business. And I know it can be done because I do that with clients already. And I want to share with you just a quick snippet of a client that I have in my PPS Academy. They have a paediatric practice in the state of Victoria, and they do NDIS work. And they approached me, when was it? Like 18 months ago. They approached me, and they work 100% in the disability space. It's a psychology practice, I will tell you that. They do a lot of positive behavior support. They do a lot of early intervention. And this practice owner approached me. We had a chat about them joining the academy. And the first thing they said, the first thing they wanted to address, they shared with me was wanting to move away from being 100% reliant on the NDIS. And I need to give them props and credit for making that decision then already, because they were 100% just doing NDIS work, and they are an NDIS registered provider. Over the last 12 to 18 months, we've been able to change that to 50% NDIS, 50% private, Medicare, other types of referrals. And that was no freaking mean feat, because if you work in a child and adolescent practice, especially within the NDIS, you would know that kids stay on your caseload for a very long time, often years. So there's not a lot of turnover of clients. But we did it. But it was slow and steady. It took 18 months to get there. But it's possible. Now you might think, well, Gerda, I don't have 18 months. Okay, but you might have 8 months. And you need to start now. You need to start thinking, what do I need to do to tap into a different market? Because I can tell you that practice owner are sleeping so much better. When the Thriving Kids announcement came out, it didn't rattle them. It's still a concern because they see that client group. They've got a lot of kids. They work with the really young ones. And a lot of their clients that's still in that 50% is going to be impacted. But they didn't freak out. They went, okay, now we need to make a plan for this. And we're making a plan together, right? But you have to start. We need to go, it is my responsibility as the practice owner to future-proof my business. And I know it's frustrating because it's like, why is the government doing this? The system is broken. But the thing is this, we only have so much impact on the government. And I have seen such great advocacy happening within the allied health community around all of these changes and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, the impact of that advocacy takes years. I hate to say it, but that doesn't impact just in a day, in a week, or even in a month. It can take years for that to have an impact. And I'm not saying stop advocating. I'm not saying stop holding the government to account. We need to do all of those things. But in the meantime, back at the ranch, it's your job as the practice owner to future-proof your business, to go, okay, this is the NDIS market. I now need to start tapping into different markets, right? Many years ago, people in the psychology field was like bulk bullying because it was easy work. It's easy for people to say, yes, I'm going to come for a session because they're being bulk bulled. And then they realized the freaking bulk bull rate was frozen for many years. And when it does increases like 30 cents. What the hell is that? Whereas cost of living, cost of running a business keeps on going up. And just like practices that marketed themselves as bulk bullying practices had to go, okay, well, I guess the time has come that I either have to close the doors because I can't pay the bills and I will be trading whilst insolvent, and I don't want to do that, or I need to tap into a different market, a market that is willing and able to pay for my services. And you don't just kick your multiple clients off your caseload, and you don't just kick your NDIS clients off your caseload, but you go, okay, let's set some targets for myself. Quick side note, if you are a group practice owner, please know that it is my mission to help you go from overwhelmed, overworked, and most probably underpaid to fully empowered and financially thriving. Helping you build a practice you can't stop smiling about is more than just a tagline in my world. It is what I do. So if you know that you want more from your business, if you know that you deserve more from your business, then today is the day I invite you to reach out. In the show notes, you will find a link to a super short triage form. Pop in your details. I will personally go through your responses and will get back to you ASAP to let you know how I can help. And if I can't, I'll point you in the right direction. Don't put your dreams on the back burner any longer. The sooner you start, the sooner I can help you get there. Now back to the episode. Because there will always be people that has money to pay for your services. Because don't forget, you're a private practice, you're a private provider, you're not an NGO. And when you go to a private business, you need to take out your wallet and pay for that service. People know they need to pay for it. You can't get your nails done without paying. You can't see a lawyer without paying, unless, of course, you go to legal aid. Okay, but that's a different market. You can't see a heart specialist without paying, unless you are willing to go sit on a wait list and be seen when it suits them through the public system. So there is always a market that you can tap into. But you need to go, that's what I'm going to do. You need to make that decision. And it's hard because this is change. And nobody likes change. And I can tell you, helping professionals are very change resistant, particularly psychologists, I can tell you that. But generally, we as humans don't like to change. And this is what's required here. When we've been doing something for so long and now we need to do it differently. And when your values, your vision for your business was aligned to helping people within the disability space, those people that are on the NDIS, and now somebody like me is telling you, no, you need to tap into a different market. I know that's not nice to hear. Okay. And I'm not saying, again, drop your NDIS clients. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is instead of being 100% reliant on that one referral source, let's get that to 90% and let's work on changing 10% of the caseload of every clinician in my practice to maybe also include Medicare clients, private paying clients, okay? And start thinking there's lots of different referral streams that you can access. I can tell you can find 10%, enough clients to pay you privately to fill 10%. And then you will slowly start building that snowball. But obviously, you need to get your marketing message right. More generally, what I want to share with you is the way that I look within my own business at the distribution of revenue streams. So when we do third-party work, and there's quite a lot of third-party work that we do as psychology group practice owners, I want third-party referrals not to be more than 30% of our revenue. So some examples of third-party work within the psychology part of allied health private practice would be, obviously, NDIS work, but also work cover, Department of Veterans Affairs, Victims Assist. You might be doing employee assistance program contracting, as well as third-party insurance, like CTP insurance, for example. So essentially, a third-party referral is where the business isn't paid by the client who is receiving the actual clinical health allied health, in our instance, service. Instead, your business is paid by a third party, hence the name. And in my humble opinion, you want all your third party work to be 30% or less. You know why? Because the revenue coming into your business from that work, as I said, it doesn't come from the client. And often when it's that third party that is paying, they are the ones that is setting the rate. So WorkCover will tell you we are paying X. Take it or leave it. DVA will tell you we pay Y. Take it or leave it. And very similar to the NDIS, particularly if you are an NDIS registered provider. For us as non-registered providers, that's okay, right? Because we actually charge our NDIS clients our private fee. Because we are unregistered, hence we don't have to stick to the NDIS amount that they say we can charge for the work that we do. And I can tell you for sure that our private rate is way more than what the NDIS will pay for a similar service. So they will tell you how much they're paying. And I don't like that. I do not like that, but I accept it. And that's the acknowledgement. I, as the business owner, when I'm engaging with those third parties, when I say yes to that work, I'm accepting the rates that they are offering me. But as a strategic business owner, I'm going to go, I'm happy to accept that for 30%. But in order for me to run a fiscally responsible business that can keep the doors open, I need to ensure that at least 70% of our revenue is set at our private rates, because I've got a very clear formula for calculating what our private fee needs to be in order to pay all our expenses, save money for a rainy day. You should have 3 to 6 months of working capital in a separate squirrel account for in case something like freaking COVID happened again. In order to run a business responsibly and sustainably, you need to know what that number is. And that's what your private fee needs to be. And because you charge that, that allows you to then go, yes, let's support, clients that has to go through a third party because they can't potentially, most likely, afford to pay privately. Okay, and I'm happy to do my part in that. I want to do that. Those are great clients, and it feels good as a helping professional to do that work. But I also know that the risk is too high as a business owner to have all your work be through any one third party. Too high. It's too high. The risk parameters just doesn't work. On a side note, if you do not have a clear data-driven method for calculating what your recommended private fee should be at your group private practice, then don't worry, I've got you covered. And because you've listened all the way to almost to the end of the episode, we're not there yet, but almost, I'm going to share with you a download link for free. So go to the show notes, find the link, and download my Excel calculator where you can literally just pop in a couple of numbers and it will help you calculate what your private fee should be at your business. And then what I want you to do is really look at, okay, if it's, let's say A, go and find then B, which is your average session fee. So what is the amount of money that you get paid on average right now per billable client hour? And then identify the gap between those two. And that will be where the work starts, because you would need to start taking some really practical steps towards moving towards your recommended private fee. Alrighty. Now, I was really hoping that this was going to be a bit of a more optimistic episode, but it didn't turn out that way. And, this is a heavy, heavy subject area. But the main message that I have for you is that these NDIS changes does not have to be the end of your practice, okay? I work with psychology and more occupational therapy, speech and physio practice owners that's coming into my world to help them slowly but surely move away from being so freaking reliant on the NDIS and instead create a business that is future-proofed, a business that's going to be sustainable and allow them to keep their doors open. And no, I am not advocating for a mass exodus of providers from the NDIS. I'm not doing that. That's not what I'm saying here. But you know what? Unless we clearly show the government that we are going to walk away if you do not change the system, it's not going to change. It's up to us to walk away and to vote with our feet. The government can actually see, okay, this is what's happening. And I am very willing to help practice owners do that one step at a time. All right, so I'm going to leave that there. I hope I haven't ruffled too many feathers with this. As I said in the start, I'm not an NDIS expert. I'm not a disability expert. I've just shared with you my thoughts as a business consultant, as a fellow grow practice owner, and I want the best for you and your business and your team and your clients. And that means that you need to keep your doors open, which means you need to be able to pay your bills, which means that you need to have a margin in your financials. And it also means that you can't burn out your team. You can't just increase KPIs so that you can prop up the margins. That's also not the answer. And I hate to think that some people might be doing that. Hopefully not in allied health. That's not something that I want because that's not sustainable. So if we want to have a sustainable allied health private practice industry, we need to run our service like a business. So thank you so very much for tuning in, for being open to hearing my thoughts on it. Feel free to flick me an email, reach out if there's any experiences that you've had with the NDIS that you want to share or any thoughts or comments that you have on this topic. I always look forward to hearing from any of you. Thank you so very much. And as always, remember that I am here to help you build a practice you can't stop smiling about.